the majority of people think their soulmate is the person that is always great sex and always fun to be with and easy, that doesn't challenge you a lot. But that's just a totally contorted concept. Your soulmate is the one that comes into your life to not only love you, but love you so thoroughly they'll tell you when you're bullshitting yourself and when you're bullshitting others and when you're being inauthentic in relationship. They will be the most polished mirror that you've ever looked at, and could be the most challenging person to stay in a relationship with, because they will grind the edges off your ego in the most loving and polite way.
This is Spirit Gym. By popular demand, today's episode is another solo cast with Paul, where he answers questions sent in by Spirit Gym members. This podcast would not be possible without you, our listeners, and also our premier sponsors, Bioptimizers, Wild Pastures, Organifi, and Paleo Valley. Keep listening to this episode for special offers and discounts from our sponsors, or visit the show notes page at paulchek.com/podcast. Our first question today comes from Lindsay, and she says, I am so grateful to have found you and your work and to integrate it into my life. Can you share a life lesson that has repeatedly shown up in your life and that eventually you were able to overcome? What was that process like, or are you still in your process?
Well, wow, there's so many of them. I think probably the life lesson that rises up in my mind is just the challenge of relationships and always considering the balance of my own needs versus other people's needs, whether it be Penny, Angie, my kids, others, because of the situation in which I was raised in as a child. I felt constantly worked, like I never really had much time to play and do the things that I wanted to do. And so one thing led to another. My child life, which, child speaking age-wise, was just never it was just really more of an adult's life with farming responsibilities and pressures all the time. And then that merged right into me becoming a father when I just turned 18. So my parents didn't have money to support us. Her parents didn't have money to support us. So it really just landed on me to just make it happen. So I just entered the workforce full force and have been going nonstop my whole life, really. So there's always a battle in me between having the freedom to do what I want and the freedom to meet obligations in relationships and share time and energy with everybody else. I constantly have to center myself and try to find the balance between time for myself, which is what I call I, and the importance of loving yourself, and the time and importance of loving my wives and my kids and being with them and holding up the responsibility of, making the money I've got to make to keep the businesses running and keep the family fed and safe and all the things that we all know about from the realities of being an adult. And then for me also the challenge of having the level of knowledge that I do and seeing the world in the state it's in and feeling very strong internal pressure to try to help educate people, to wake them up to the realities of what's going on in the world and how, we've got to manage ourselves with regard to things like the resources of the soil and taking care to put money in the hands of organic and regenerative and biodynamic farmers and people that are taking care of the planet, and just this sort of inherent drive to help people wake up and educate them on as many levels as I can. And so it's really like an ongoing inner struggle in a sense, where I have to try to figure out how do I do all that. There's only 24 hours in a day and the days just seem to go by so fast it's hard for me to keep track of. It's something that I've gotten better at. It's something that I'm still growing in. And I think it's a challenge that pretty much everybody faces, especially if they're married and have children. And it's easy to have belief systems in place that, tell you should sacrifice yourself to take care of everybody else, but that leads to burnout and poor quality relationships and resent of the people that you love. And there's the issue of keeping our bodies healthy and making time for that. And so to do that, I've built that as a routine into my day so that I build my work schedule around things like getting exercise and having time to be in the sauna and the cold plunge to just take care of my body, and making sure we're eating the highest quality foods we can possibly get, whether we grow them or, eat from our own birds, our chickens and our goats and all the things involved with that. So I think, one of the things that helps me is the sort of practice of using my heart to feel what I know, and trying to listen to my heart more than I listen to my head, and then working with Penny the best I can to manage my schedule so that it doesn't get so intense that I just feel like I can't breathe, because I can end up with loads of podcast appointments and work to do with my Spirit Gym book series and consulting and clients, and it can just be very, very intense. I think this is why I have been for so many years encouraging people, I before we always. If you don't create time for yourself to do the things you need to do to keep yourself happy and healthy, then your life just seems to fall apart. And you can spend so much money trying to medicate the symptoms of not having time to be in and with yourself and have a legitimate spiritual practice, which is, begins with connecting to yourself and then being clear on what your values are, so that you and whoever your partner is, like spousal partner or a relationship partner, who maybe you live with, can have a clear set of mutual values that you use to guide and direct your choices, your use of money, your use of time, and what's important for you together. And then looking at how it is that you're contributing to the world, either as a living example or by donations or by community service or whatever it is that feels congruent with your values and makes you feel like you're contributing. So that's sort of my ongoing learning and my ongoing process, which I think is probably inherent in everybody's lives. And I think that it's probably one of the most important things for us, because we can easily wake up and feel like crap, find our body not feeling good, running out of energy. And that's, the doorway to a lot of addictions and to shortcuts with food and packaged foods and snack foods and biohacking and, looking for magic bullets. And, I watch people destroy themselves doing this stuff. But at the pace the world moves and, with the changes in economy, and it's just easy to get caught in a treadmill where you feel like you're just working and working and working to pay bills, and it's hard to get ahead. Again, that's where values come in, because a lot of times people are spending money on things that aren't really adding any value to their life, but they are adding expenses to their life and the need to somehow pay that all off. That's really what rises up in me as the big challenge. And then with kids, making sure they get enough time, in my case from me, because I'm the father, and having the energy to play instead of do things that may not be ideal for kids. And I think, we have a real crisis in parenting in the world right now because of these issues. So I don't want to contribute to that. But I think our children are our future. So if we don't really orient ourselves consciously to taking time to effectively educate kids and grow their creativity and learn to play with them in ways that is effective for them. For example, I took the kids out Sunday to behind my guest suite, where I have a big stone bird feeder that I filled with sand and all sorts of gemstones and round rocks and carved rocks and just little trinkets where we just go out there and build things. And Zoe made a mandala and Mon and I each made a little rock stack. And it only took about 20 minutes, but they really had fun, and it's creative. It's not mathematical, logical, left brain thinking. And we were outside under the patio, but outside in a nice natural environment. And sometimes we'll go on walks together or paddle around in the canoe in our pond or build things, or I'll work with Mana on his go-kart and do go-kart rides and teach him how to fix things. And it's really a combination of all these things. I don't have a simple solution. I just know it's important to be clear on what your dream is for yourself and for your partnership, your relationship, your family, have clear values to support it, and then make sure you build your work life around getting your personal needs met. Because if you're not fully present in relationships and you don't have the energy for relationships, then really what is life without your relationships? And the first relationship we have is to ourselves. So I think that's where most people need to begin, is really, what do I have to do to keep myself healthy and keep myself vital so that I have love and energy and creativity to share?
Great. Okay, our second question I've actually compiled from several questions from people. They're very common questions that we get asked, or you get asked a lot. So here goes. I am new to your work and programs, but feel very much drawn to it. However, there is a lot of information and I am a little overwhelmed. Where do you recommend I start? What do I read, watch, or listen to first? And then what are the next steps?
Well, I'm not sure which programs you're relating to. I mean, I do have, something like 1,200 videos on YouTube. I have the Chek Institute's programs, which are many and vast. The Chek Academy, which is a 5-year structured program. I have Spirit Gym, which is very comprehensive, but it's designed to be followed in the orders that the lessons are presented. So that's an easy one. I think the most important thing, because of the breadth and the depth of my teachings, is to really just ask yourself what's important to you. If it's on YouTube, then you can just search those subject names, such as health or exercise or a specific injury or things that are relevant to you. With the amount of videos I have in there, they cover almost everything. With the Chek Institute, I think the best place to start is Holistic Lifestyle Coach Level 1, which is really our public program that opens the door to the professional training, but covers the things that are most important to know to keep yourself healthy, without which nothing else really matters. My book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, is the introduction to that program, which is available through the Chek Institute or on Amazon. But Spirit Gym's really a holistic spiritual development program that includes the basics of what's in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. It covers nutrition, hydration, sleep, breathing, thinking, and movement. But it's really a structured program that's designed to teach you everything that's the most important to understand about truly holistic spiritual development. And it's something that is designed and ideal for all Chek professionals at any level of their training, even though some of it will be a recapitulation of their teachings. It's presented from a spiritual perspective. In a nutshell, because of the vast amount of teachings, which is what you're referring to, the most important thing for you to do is get clear on what your dream is for your life right now, 2, where you're out of balance relative to living that dream, and then go look for what information I have published, either in written or video or audio form, or my podcasts, which are now well over 300 episodes, again, covering a wide variety of topics, often in much greater depth than they are covered in most podcasts in the world. And then from that perspective of what your dream is and where you feel like you're out of balance and you need more support to really accomplish your dream, whether that be to get healthy or to accomplish success in a career. A good place to start, by the way, is my Evolve Yourself podcast series. It begins with Evolve Yourself physically, and then it goes to Evolve Yourself emotionally, then Evolve Yourself mentally, then Evolve Yourself spiritually, then Evolve Your career. So those 5 podcasts were the most listened to podcasts of all my podcasts for probably a good couple of years, and some of them are still doing very well up there. But that is kind of a great little foundation, those 5 podcasts, that also refers to other material that I teach throughout those podcasts, so that if you come across something where you go, oh, I'd like to know more about that, it'll tell you where to go. So that's my best answer. Without a very specific question, it's hard to direct you. But if you follow the advice I've just shared, or anybody, I think you'll find that it's easier to utilize the toolbox of my teachings in ways that are specific to your needs. Hi, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. One of the most amazing things we can do for ourselves is actually to get high quality, raw, green, unprocessed vegetables into our body, And one of the things that I find amazing is Organifi's green juice. In fact, it's so amazing, I brought Drew Canoli, the creator of the product, to tell us what is unique about it. Drew, that is an amazing drink. How does it work? What does it do? Why is it so special?
Well, first of all, Paul, we went through 52 iterations to get the current formulation of green juice, and we're always increasing the value in it. One of the biggest things we did is we actually added 600 milligrams of ashwagandha, full spectrum. So it's a completely higher level of ashwagandha, which actually has been shown in clinicals, and we have dozens of clinicals on this, that has actually been shown to lower stress.
Yes.
Is the big thing.
Ashwagandha is something I've used for years, even with my clients for stress management.
Yep. So when you drink ashwagandha, it puts you in the green juice, it puts you in a meditative space. And we start at first thing in the morning drinking green juice. And because of the adaptogen in it, after 30 to 60 days of continual use, it makes such a big difference in your life. You're getting all the vegetables that are glyphosate residue free.
Yes.
They're organic, right? Highest quality that you could ever imagine. We got the spirulina and the chlorella, which is so important with all the different frequencies that are entering our environment today to help you detox from those.
Yes.
The green juice is bar none my favorite product at Organifi. And the best part about it is it tastes incredible.
Yes, it does. It's good. And I know my kids love it. So that's always the litmus test.
Yeah, it's like a matcha latte that you have first thing in the morning. And with the ashwagandha, lowering your stress, you feel it all day long. It gives you this internal wealth of energy.
It's just mixed with water. You mix it, and now is the green juice one you can mix with hot water, or is it best cold?
A lot of people actually prefer it with hot water. Some people will grab their favorite kind of oat milk or almond milk, something like that, and they'll add it to it. And we've gotten thousands of testimonials from all over the world. People start their day with green juice, and it makes such a big difference in their life.
Well, that's fantastic. So if you want to get your green juice, which I highly recommend, go to Organifi.com. That's Organifi, Organifi.com. And on checkout, Living 4D listeners get 20% off if you use the code capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K, 20. You will not be disappointed.
All right, our next question comes from Justin, and I know it's one that you've been asked many times in the past, but I also know it's one that people continually ask you as well. So this one is specific to a client that Justin has. I have a client, an 89-year-old female, who after her husband passed acquired a fungal infection, candida, and which primarily manifests as burning of the mouth late in the hours of the night. I put her on a 100-day antifungal cleanse and then did a full mold remediation on her house, and then another 100 days of antifungal protocol, as well as used products for oral dysbiosis, and nothing seems to be helping. The candida has been verified by blood work results. Curious if you have any ideas or a good next step on what may be going on here.
Well, there's a lot of things that could be going on. One, when I have patients like that, I do an environmental toxicity panel. Any functional medicine practitioner can do. And it looks at something along the lines of 185 chemicals, such as those in plastics, building materials, cosmetics, heavy metals, pesticides, all sorts of stuff that we need to know about. Just for example, people that have mercury in their body or mercury amalgam fillings can be placing such a huge load on the immune system, on the nervous system, on the brain, because mercury creates neural entanglements which confuse the brain. It's like somebody jumbling the wiring in a stereo system or something, and all of a sudden it doesn't work very well or work at all. A lot of these chemicals can be debilitating to the immune system and to the body at large, and weaken our ability to heal from almost anything. A gut dysbiosis can also be a problem. Once someone has a deep fungal infection, which means it penetrates through the gut wall and gets to the interior of the body, they need to live on a pretty strict antifungal diet for the rest of their life. One of the things I've found working with patients like that is that they come back and report that they're doing things or report that they're following the antifungal diet, but I find that they're actually not when I investigate. So I developed a daily questionnaire system I use with my clients and patients, and it asks the key questions of the 4 doctors. What did you do today that is happy making? Tell me what you did for exercise, how much, what type. Tell me what you ate specifically, including spices, including supplementation, including hydration, and tell me what your bowel movements look like, the key things about how easy or hard to pass they were, how much came out of you, so I can determine if you have constipation. I then look at movement, and I look at sleep times, sleep quality, sleep experiences, introspection, or time for them to be within themselves and what they're doing to grow their inner awareness and inner life. And when I have people fill that daily questionnaire out and I monitor it, I find that they're frequently making significant mistakes relative to what I've asked them to do in the program. And there's many things they don't understand. For example, it's really common for people that I give an antifungal diet to keep eating things that feed funguses. You'll never win a battle against a fungus if you don't follow the rules. As a side note, one of the things that can be very helpful is grapefruit seed extract. It is quite effective. But the problem is if people feel better and then they start eating the stuff they shouldn't be eating, then they just bring the fungal infection back. The other thing is vaccinations, especially since COVID. There's all sorts of stuff in vaccinations that disrupt, weaken, and debilitate the immune system. And they've got all sorts of heavy metals in them and other things such as parasites and a variety of things that keep the body under tremendous stress and weaken the body so that it makes it very, very hard for people to get over things like fungal infections. But the answer is once you do this investigation, then you have to go through what is usually quite a comprehensive protocol of detoxification. It can be gut detoxification. I use the all-natural 60-day cleanse. I evaluate them for parasites. It's very, very common when people have fungal infections to also have a parasite infection at the same time, both of which put tremendous stress on the body. The parasites will eat the nutrition of the food before the body can get it through the gut wall. So you can be eating what looks like a good diet, but show all the signs of malnutrition, and that will open the door wide for a fungal infection. Fungal infections the fungi release chemicals that downregulate the immune system and make the immune system unable to police parasites effectively. So it's really common with people that have fungal infections to have parasites, heavy metal poisoning, mercury amalgam fillings, dissimilar metals in their teeth, which sets up electrolysis and overloads key meridians in the body and leads to gland and organ pathology. It's common for people to be eating commercially raised foods full of glyphosate, which wipes out the gut microbiome. It's common for people to have dysbiosis. So it's a fairly comprehensive issue to get a real good long-term cure of a fungal infection. And then, you mentioned mold remediation. That's a common one. My online program called Healing Fungal and Parasite Infections, The Absolute Essentials, has a lot of key information. Then we also have the issue of electromagnetic exposure due to cell phones and cell phone towers and the way houses are designed and screens. And so I highly recommend the use of biogeometry. The biogeometry home kit comes with attachments for the water mains, for the electrical mains, and comes with a special cube device that will handle 4,000 square feet, which if you put in a Pyrex bowl in water, so it's just a little bit less than covered with water, but a quarter of an inch from the top, so it's sitting in water, it'll pretty much double the power of that biogeometry cube. That has a very stabilizing effect on the body, which can help it heal tremendously. And there's biogeometry pendants that help harmonize each of the glands and organs in the body. There's the L90, which helps protect the body against negative energies. That's one of the most important things I recommend to anybody that's a patient of mine, just because we're saturated with electromagnetic pollution. There's also other factors such as chemicals in the car they're driving, in the work environment that they're in. Somebody needs to be evaluated for chemical sensitivity. There's questionnaires that will give you an indication of how chemically sensitive or toxic they are. Dr. Andrew Kaufman, MD, has some great detox protocols and things like spiragic cilantro, which will help detox heavy metals out of the body. There's a number of people out there with detox protocols for COVID vaccines and things such as pine needle tea and a variety of other things, including spiragic cilantro. Dr. Minkoff's metal-free product is very good, and you can look into that. I've had people go through chelation therapy because they were just so desperately in need of a deep detox that they needed that type of therapy, which also gets rid of a lot of the heavy metals in the body. But sticking to the foundation principles of eating high quality food and getting adequate sleep, giving the body the right amount of exercise and the right type of exercise are very, very important. Because if you don't get the foundation right and have high quality nutrition and high quality water, that's another thing. Quality has to be investigated. I talk about that in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. If you don't get all the basic building blocks in place that are a requirement for health for anybody, then usually what you have is a situation where the person does not have enough vitality to keep their core survival systems online and functioning well, such as your digestive, eliminative, detoxification, nervous, limbic, emotional, thermoregulatory, hormonal, all your core systems, which most people today don't have enough energy to keep those systems even running effectively. So the body has to start shutting some of them down to supply the resources and energy that the other ones need to stay online. One of the side effects of being tired all the time and having too much cortisol is that the immune system gets chronically shut down due to the fact that we're in too much of a fight or flight state all the time. So, as you can tell by now, there's a lot of moving pieces that have to be looked at. That's why I have to have lab tests, and I have to, have an injury history and look at what the state of their mental, emotional health is, what their spiritual or religious orientation is, so I can see if that's helping them or actually putting more stress on them. I have to look at the relationships they're maintaining and how stressful those are, and if there's awareness that needs to be developed there. We have to remember that all stress summates or accumulates in the body, and the typical approach to things like fungal infections is to throw this pill or that pill or this or that detox, but without realizing that there's stress entering that person's body from so many different aspects of their life that if we don't do a more of a general house cleaning, so to speak, and try to lower stress anywhere we can, then you're not going to get your vitality up high enough to overcome a fungal infection. And we got to remember, funguses are at the very root system of the tree of taxonomy, which is all living things in nature, which means they're the oldest, most capable, most diverse creatures or beings on this planet, and they can really survive almost anything you can throw at them, or the earth would have died a long time ago because of the fungal necessity of the fungal network in the soil. So once you get a fungal infection, it's a real warning from the pain teacher that you need to get your life in order and get your body in balance, or you're not going to have the vitality to support you, and you're not going to be able to make the choices that are necessary to make the changes in your life, which can be many for most people that are needed in order to ultimately heal from a fungal infection. The good news is that the fungus is a great teacher because it always gives you relatively quick feedback as to what you're doing that's either working because you're getting less symptoms and feeling better, more energized, clearer mind, better sleep quality, just a better quality of life, and what you're doing that's making it worse. And so this is why that 4-doctor questionnaire I developed is so important, because it gives a person sort of a mirror they can look into every day and see where they're managing themselves in life affirmative and dream affirmative ways and in line with the coaching program, or where they're not. And then where they're not, we have to look at why that is. And that almost always leads to addictions and to unresolved traumas and fear-based thinking and things that have to be worked on with a skilled coach. Because if those things aren't addressed, then all the supplements and all the medications and even the right ones ultimately don't work, because the real issue is deeper than the physical symptoms. I wish I could be more specific, but without having details on any given patient, all I can do is give you broad strokes. So those are the things that are of concern to me as a therapist.
Over the nearly 30 years that Paul and I have grown the Chek Institute, we've seen countless talented health and fitness practitioners fall short of their full potential, not because they lacked skill or passion, but because they didn't understand one critical thing. To succeed as a health or wellness professional, you must also have a solid understanding of business. Without this essential proficiency, personal trainers, coaches, chiropractors, and physical therapists get stuck in an endless cycle of feast or famine, never quite achieving the long-term sustainable success they dream of and they deserve. The Chek Institute is about to change all that. This November, we are launching a brand new program, the first of its kind in our industry, called Integrated Health Business Professional Level 1. Whether you're a personal trainer, rehabilitation specialist, or looking to shift into health coaching, the IHBP Level 1 is a practical, step-by-step program to guide you as you build and scale your business. And it's all created by the Chek Institute CEO, Gavin Jennings, who's built and run the most successful Chek clinic in the world with over 120,000 client-hour sessions delivered. Register your interest now, and you'll not only get a fantastic discount on the launch price, you'll also receive some amazing free gifts with your purchase. And the best part? Just by registering, you'll get free access to an exclusive workshop with Gavin Jennings himself called Working the Middle Ground, The Future of Health. So if you are truly passionate about building a successful and profitable career in holistic and integrated health, then the IHBP Level 1 program is for you. Go to chek.group/business to find out more and register. That's chek.group/business. Our next question comes from Miko, and Miko says, I would like to ask Paul, why must evil exist? I already listened to the Lucifer Araman podcast episode, and I know I better listen to it again. I also know that the yin-yang thing is very real, and that, in quotes, the cave you fear entering holds the treasure you seek. But perhaps Paul could give his view and wisdom on these things.
Well, that's a deep question. I just heard Aubrey Marcus on his podcast having a bit of a debate with Nassim Harriman about that exact thing. There's a variety of opinions on it. First of all, I'd like to state that we have to kind of clarify what evil is, because it means something different to different people. To me, evil is any behavior, belief, or behavior that goes against life itself. If you look at the word LIVE, backwards, it's EVIL. So evil is, in essence, living backwards. And so to address the question at its fundamental roots, why does evil have to exist? The real issue, if you look at it honestly, is that without evil, there is no free will. Speaking from a mythical perspective or theological perspective, my investigations into evil basically come to the conclusion that though God is the source of everything, including all sentient beings, including human beings, God does not want to be loved inauthentically. Therefore, evil is our option to not love, to not care, to think only of ourself and not the other. Evil is the antagonist to what we would call the good. And if we did not have evil, we would not be able to recognize the good. There would be no way for us to recognize it, just like we don't know what north is without south, he without she, up without down, in without out, etc. So because evil exists, it allows people to choose love, which is the verb of God, consciously, and therefore to choose love over evil, to choose life over death, or behaviors and practices that facilitate death against life. Essentially, without evil, if you really meditate on it, there would be no capacity for free will. And because I believe through my own investigations and what I teach in Spirit Gym that God cannot consciously evolve without a duality, and that God cannot become conscious itself or of anything else, all of which would be within God, because God is that for which there is no other, then the paradox of it is that God has to explore the dark aspects of itself or the evil aspects with as much commitment as to the good aspects. If God only knew the good of itself, then it would have one hell of a shadow, which would be all the dark side. Because, to quote Jung, when the Christian church created Jesus Christ, he cast a light so bright, they had to create Satan to counterbalance him. Whenever you create a bright light, you also create the possibility for a big shadow. And light has no meaning without darkness. So there you see the conundrum that you cannot have consciousness without these two complementary opposites, which is really what the Tai Chi symbol is showing you at a very fundamental level. Now, with those kind of basic principles out of the way, we have to remember that evil is relative. There is cultures in Africa, for example, when women go through their initiation ceremony, they cut their clitoris out. And to a Westerner, that is pure evil. If you look at the history of circumcision, which many people think is evil, my research shows it goes all the way back to the Spartans. And when they were training young men, particularly at that time as boys, to become a Spartan, one of their first tests was that they had to have their foreskin removed without any anesthesia, without making a single sound, because they're being trained to be warriors. So even when they're in pain, they have to be quiet or the enemy can locate them, and, death is usually the result. And so what do you see? Most people think a lot of people think that is evil. But if it's an evil that trains a warrior to serve the good of protecting its people, then you have to say, is it really evil from that perspective? Many people think abortion is evil, but is it more evil than bringing children into the world that aren't going to be loved and supported and nurtured and become healthy contributors to the world? So when you really start looking at it, you see that evil is a value judgment, and how anyone expresses their relationship to evil is as unique to them as which flavors of food somebody likes or what religion they believe in. And then you have the issue of all sorts of religious ideology. And even in Christianity, all you got to do is read the Bible and study Christianity, Islam, Judaism, their history of war, their history of killing each other, their history of killing people within their own religions, and look at the fact that Christianity now has 45,000 branches, all claiming to have the authentic teachings of Jesus, many of which have very intense battles with each other. So what I'm pointing is, if you look within the context of any religion and you say, well, if evil is that which is against life, and you read the Bible, you'll see there's so damn much evil in the Bible that it's shocking. And most of it is in the name of God or through the dictates of Yahweh and many other such things. And without going through all the religions, you see that what is evil is actually different, depending on which religion you look at, and how they justify it is different. And just the way they treat women in each religion or children. One religion looks at it and says, that's evil, you should never do that. And then that religion looks at their own practices and says, well, without this, you won't achieve this. So they all find a way to justify it. So that's one of the challenges, because what one person thinks is evil, another person thinks is good, and they have as much justification for it as the other guy. This is why I tell all my students, use your heart to feel what you know, and always ask yourself, what would love do now? If you read the Law of One series by Ra goes into great depth, showing that there are basically two types of souls: those that are oriented towards service to self, or the negative path, which is what most of us would call evil, and those that are oriented to the service to other path, or love. Both of those paths have to exist in order for free will to happen, in order for evolution to happen. But the good thing is, based on my research and explorations of this, evil also has a tendency to isolate itself. For example, evil people want to steal as much as they can or manipulate people for as much as they can get. And it's always about themselves. It's always about them versus other people. It's always about you're wrong, we're right. It's always about accumulating more power, more money, more sex, more control. But because that sort of service to self orientation is inherent within each person practicing what we would call evil, ultimately, it's kind of like how many Bill Gateses can you put in a room before they start exterminating another, because they all want to win the game, so to speak. And so, and Ra talks about this as well. Ultimately, evil becomes, regardless of how much it accumulates as wealth or sex or whatever, it puts itself in a corner where it's progressively more and more alone. And then the angst and the isolation that comes with that ultimately leads one to the realization that without switching to the service for other path, or service to other, or service to love path, one cannot grow in their sense of connection. In spirituality, a definition of spirituality is a progressive connection to a greater whole. But you could say evil is a progressive connection to a lesser whole. So one leads to isolation and loneliness and pain, and the other one leads to more love and more connection and a greater sense of safety and security in knowing that there is always love in God. So if you consider all these things together, you'll realize it's a very complex issue. And it's complex because human beings are complex. We don't see issues of evil amongst chickens or amongst wolves or amongst horses or elephants or giraffes or octopus or sea urchins, but we do see it amongst human beings. What some of us might think of as evil amongst the creatures of nature is really just the normal way that nature creates a balance. If there's a surplus of rabbits, more coyotes show up. When the rabbits go away, the coyotes starve out and the population goes down. So everything in nature is sort of a dynamic balance. But within human beings, because of our intellect that rises above our instincts, we can actually begin to get so out of balance within ourselves and within our relationships and our relationship to the world that it's very easy for us to actually be unconscious of how we are destroying the fabric of life, destroying the fabric of relationships, and leading ourselves into isolation. And a lot of evil is oriented towards money and power. But if you look at the myth of Midas, Midas was very money hungry. He wanted everything to be gold. But lo and behold, when he touched his daughter and his wife and all of his family turned into gold, he realized that he could no longer have the love and the relationships that make life worth living. And that put him into a lot of pain. And he had to ask for help to reconcile it. So in a nutshell, evil is essential for free will. It's essential for there to be freedom, but ultimately it extinguishes itself because it pushes you into isolation, and without connection to something other than and bigger than yourself, being isolated is really like being put into a death sentence. So those are the things that I would consider.
Coffee. There are few smells more evocative than a freshly brewed pot of coffee. For some, coffee is the essential kickstarter for the day. For others, it's a sacred ritual. But most store-bought coffee is commercially grown, sprayed with pesticides, and full of mycotoxins and mold, turning your cup of coffee into a toxic brew. Fortunately, Paleo Valley's polyphenol-dense organic coffee is a clean, healthy option to help you get your coffee fix. The coffee beans are sourced from organic, sustainable farms in Central and South America and freshly roasted in the USA using solar power. The coffee is then infused with organic coffee fruit extract and 8 organic functional mushrooms. It's tested for pesticides, mold, and mycotoxins to help ensure you're getting a clean, high-quality coffee. The organic coffee fruit extract is loaded with polyphenols, which are powerful antioxidants that shield and protect your body from everyday stress. Coffee fruit extract is particularly supportive of age-related cognitive function. It can contribute to healthy brain function, memory, and performance. The 8 functional mushrooms, including lion's mane, cordyceps, shiitake, turkey tail, and reishi, provide various health benefits like helping your body respond better to everyday stress, improving mental clarity, and supporting sleep. Best of all, Paleo Valley's coffee tastes amazing. You'd never know you were drinking a beverage that supports cognitive function and nurtures both your body and mind with each sip. The medium to dark roast gives it a robust, vibrant flavor, and it's crafted to be low acidic, so it's gentle on your gut. This is the coffee we serve at Paul's Rainbow workshops and classes, and the students love it. It's available in both regular and decaf options, and you can try Paleo Valley polyphenol dense organic coffee and get a 15% discount by going to paleovalley.com/Chek15 and using the code Chek15 when you check out. Paleo Valley want you to be thrilled with your purchase, so if you aren't 100% happy with your coffee, they offer a 60-day, 100% money-back guarantee. So go to paleovalley.com/Chek15 to try Paleo Valley's new coffee without risk and save 15%. In your last answer, Paul, you mentioned the law of one and Ra. And so this next question from Frank ties in with that. What are your thoughts on the law of one channeled material? What do you think about what Ra shares about the history of people on planet Earth, Mars, and Maldek, and what Ra shares about the different densities of consciousness? And also, what are your thoughts on other channel materials such as Seth, Bashar, or Paul Selig?
Well, first of all, David Wilcock speaks a lot about the raw material in his wisdom teaching series on Gaia. I can't remember if it was through David Wilcock or others that I learned about the raw teachings, but David Wilcock says, and I've not found this, and I haven't taken the time to email him, but apparently there's some kind of a rating scale for channeled material that determines the efficacy of it, and the raw material scored at 98%, which is very high. There's another factor here with channeled material. The first thing I would say about channeled material is there's a lot of good stuff, but there's also a lot of junk out there. So one has to look at channeled material with the degree of discernment that they would look at almost anything. And if you look at social media, and you've seen some of my Paul Reacts posts, there's a lot of garbage out there and put out by people with very high credentials, unfortunately, in every aspect of life. So you have to have a level of discernment. And my approach to all that is do your own investigations. Most people are just too lazy to do their own research. I think that when you're listening to things like Seth, Paul Selig, and those types of channel works, of many of which I've studied, I have many of the channeled books in here. Abraham is another good one. A lot of that material is very, very high quality. I mean, it wouldn't matter if it was channeled or not. It would still be good material. With regard to the general teachings of the Law of One, I don't see anything in there that I don't take seriously. Fortunately for me, I've studied so many books and so much different material that I can make correlations between, for example, when you look at Steiner's explanations of how human beings came to be and the different epochs of human evolution, and Ra's material, though they say slightly different things, the general consensus is fairly similar. I've asked my soul regularly, which is how I get clarity on things, because your soul is God within you. So the question is, do you have a deep enough connection with your soul and the ability to filter your ego out so you can actually hear the truth from your own soul to get good guidance from your soul, which is why a legitimate spiritual practice is so important. And it's exactly why I created Spirit Gym, so people had the necessary education to go through the process of deepening their connection to their spirit and their soul to have a good inner guidance system and what I call a North Star on your compass, so you don't get lost in the vast sea of information and the chaos of the world. One of the things about the raw material is that a lot of the things that Ra spoke about were not proven, but later were proven by scientific investigations, and that happened a number of times due to within the context of the raw material. So that's one way to recognize that the material is actually quite authentic. when you look at what most people's conception of God is, or source, most people don't really have the capacity to even comprehend or even effectively imagine. When you consider that whatever God is, God, in my definition, is that for which there is no other. And another key definition of God is that God is the only being capable of creating and sustaining itself. We can't do that. I don't know of any other being that can create and sustain itself. Even the devil was created by God. It says right in Isaiah 45:7 in the King James Bible, I create the light and the dark, good and evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. So that's one of a variety of references one could find. But because God is God, there's nothing that's here that doesn't come from the creative impulse of God, whether we like it or not. And so when we're trying to conceive of God, if you look at the world's religions, the world's great religions, they are all different conceptions of God. There are commonalities, but there are also vast differences in the perspectives on God. And you even have Buddhism that doesn't use the word God because of a number of issues, such as the confusion it creates, but they refer to the ground of being. Judaism, in its authentic source, does not spell the word God because of it being sacred and not wanting to make the assumption that they know what God is or what God wants. I might be putting words in the mouth of the Jewish people, but it's clear that they don't spell the word God. But when you look at all these world religions, they are very different. The rules and regulations on what you can eat, what you can wear, sex. I mean, even within the divisions of Hinduism, you've got Tantra on one side that embraces taboo, that embraces sex as a path to God. Yet you go to Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and you'll see tons and tons of restrictions on what Tantra feels is important because they are the realities of God itself and therefore should not be rejected, but used as a vehicle for legitimate spiritual growth, which I have tremendous respect for many reasons. But the deeper point I'm getting at here is I could go through quantum physics and show you that when they try to calculate the total energy in the universe, it's infinite. And what is God if not intelligent energy? So the question I have for everybody is, how do you conceive of a source or a being, if you will, that is infinite in its intelligence, infinite in its supply of energy, infinite in its information, infinite in its processing power, infinite in its processing speed, infinite in creativity, just to name a few? How does the human mind begin to put a container on anything that's infinite? Well, quite frankly, it's impossible to do. Second, we must remember that the word mind really is something that comes from and has a relationship to the word logos, and the ancient alchemists referred to the mind as the logos cutter. Why? Because the mind must always cut something out in order for it to be circumscribed. Remember, if we're talking about God, the word about means around, not through. It does not penetrate. When you're talking about someone, you're just talking about them, but you're not really reaching the essence of any individual. So what we have to do is we have to create stories that we choose to believe about God. And God wants this, God wants that. God will do this to you if you don't do that. Well, if you understand what God is, God has everything and is everything. So any God that has rules and regulations and punishments on what it'll do to you, for example, in the Christian Bible, thou shalt worship no other God before me, I am a jealous God, etc. Well, that's not God at all. Anybody that understands God knows right away that that's just a myth, not a healthy one in many respects. Now, some Christians may get upset with me, but I'll leave you to explore these things openly and honestly, or you're just brainwashed. So how does that relate to your question? It relates to the fact that if God is God, then we are expressions of God. And because God is unconditional and infinite, whatever beliefs you have about God, you go into sympathetic resonance with, and God meets you right where you're at. And you can see people evolve. I've studied this extensively. If you look at the structure stages of consciousness, for example, you see that people grow from I-centric to we-centric to world-centric to cosmocentric. Each of those is a great big expanse on their sense of who and what they really are. First, you orient yourself towards just your personal needs and what you want at the expense of others. Then you evolve to think of the needs of your group, which is we-centric or ethnocentric religion, which is my group versus your group. Then you go to world-centric orientation when you realize that you are part of the world and could not be here without the whole world. Then you realize that the world couldn't be here without the entire cosmos, and to the degree that you can really be in resonance and have that as your living truth, then you realize that you are one with the entire cosmos. Or universe, if you want to look at it that way. And then you reach the point where you realize that whatever God is, it's what you are, and what you are is what God is in many ways, except God's not limited to human conception or human form. So how that relates to channeled work is that whatever channeled work appeals to you and gives you reason to believe or inspires you, if it inspires you to be a better person, or to live better, or to love more, then it's safe to say that that channeler or that channeled material is in sympathetic resonance with whatever you deem your values and your highest truth at that time. And so as you evolve in these structure stages of consciousness, which happens naturally but very slowly unless you get involved in legitimate spiritual development, then you will find that as you evolve, then channeled materials that were once very interesting and seem very truthful to you, now, years later, you look back at them and you can see that they're very limited and that maybe they are oriented toward a ethnocentric message, or that they are limited, or like I look at, for example, a lot of the diet advice given in channeled material, and it's just ridiculous. One of the things that I do when I look at channeled works is I look carefully at things that I have a lot of knowledge of and investigated and see what their opinions are. So I'm always looking for things like diet advice, health advice, what their conception of the soul is, what their conception of spirit is, what their conception of God is. And it's easy for me to see where these conceptions are very, very limited. And then we also have to remember that channeled material is usually channeling higher dimensional beings that are much more evolved than we are. And often, even if you study the raw material, you'll see many times, I think it's Roland McCarty, if I remember right, or Jim McCarty, is the one who is asking the questions through the channel. And Ra says on various occasions, that's not the right question, or that question has to be reframed, or we cannot answer that question because the answer to that might limit your freedom. So the point I'm making is that we cannot interpret something coming from a higher dimensional being beyond our own framework of comprehension and context, and therefore our capacity to understand, which is limited by our own level of knowledge. For example, Ra could tell you potentially how to extract energy from the 0-point field, but it might require advanced knowledge of electronics, or advanced knowledge of physics, or quantum physics, or astrophysics, or atomic physics, or subatomic physics. But if you don't have that, then there's no way you can interpret the message from a higher dimensional being. And so what's likely to happen is you're going to use, shall we say, an infantile frame of reference to try to interpret a message that's actually turns out to be saying something very different. And that's the problem. All channeled material comes through a channeler, and the channeler is the filter by which the material comes in. So one of your first tips is you have to look at what is the belief system of the channeler? What is the health and the vitality of the channeler? There's a great saying, never judge a man by the creed he or she professes, but by the life he or she lives. So if you look at the lives of these channelers, and are they exemplary lives? Are they part of an ism or a religion that is ethnocentric? Well, then you're going to see right there the context of the filtration system. And because they're only going to go into resonance with beings that are sympathetic to them, i.e., resonating to that level of consciousness. For example, someone who practices evil can easily go into resonance with higher dimensional beings, or much more capable beings than us, that are all for the practice of evil. Because if you can imagine it, it exists. That's the power of the mind of God, or the creative abilities of God. So I think channeled material really just acts like a mirror of our own mind and a mirror of our own development. And if a person does not have an adequate depth of understanding and knowledge and frame of reference for enough of the general sciences and philosophies, then they can easily find themselves making choices and having beliefs based on channeled material that they don't realize is just a reflection of their own level of development. So it's kind of like just hanging around with a bunch of people that think you're God and constantly tell you how good you are, even though you might be doing things that are very dangerous and destructive. And just to show you how easy that is to happen, look at the fact that Christians sing Onward Christian Soldiers marching off to war with the cross of Jesus going on before. Well, Jesus would never march off to war and kill people, and Jesus would not want his likeness being used as any kind of an icon or symbol to protect people killing each other, which would then make the impression that there are people that Jesus does not love and care for. So it doesn't, you could say if the Bible was channeled, it would only be something that would resonate with people that are at that level of consciousness, which has produced exactly what we see in the world right now, as with all the other religions too. So those are the key points that I think are important. It's a good question, but I'll close by saying, use your heart to feel what you know. If you read channeled works and you ask yourself this question, if everybody did what this channel is suggesting, what Ra is suggesting, would the world be a better place? If everybody did what Abraham is suggesting, or Paul Selig, any of these channeled sources, would the world be a better place? If it's good channeled material, the answer will be yes. If it's not, it'll favor a select few, or it'll be an ideology that has as much potential to destroy as it does to create or to lead you into a belief system that pits you against other people. So that's how I put it. One of the most amazing Bioptimizer's products I've ever used is Biome Breakthrough, which used to be called Leaky Gut Guardian. I can honestly say I use it every single day. I have a morning routine. I put a scoop in with 2 fresh squeezed limes. I put a little bit of other ingredients that I like in there. And I'll tell you what, if any of you have read my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, and you know how to read your poops, well, Biome Breakthrough makes for some really nice poopy policemen. I've got Wade here to tell us what's so unique about it, but I want to tell you right up front, I love this stuff. I don't go anywhere without it, and I keep a lot of it on hand so I don't run out. So Wade, what is it that's making that product so effective?
Well, first and foremost, we have to look at what's happening in the population at large. And Harvard just released an extensive study demonstrating that virtually everyone has some degree of leaky gut. And that means the gut permeability of our intestines is leaking toxins into the system, which are causing immunoresponses. Now, some people that's sneezing or allergies, but then it can move on to more inflammatory conditions. And anybody that's checked out your work understands this. The question is, how do you actually seal the gut so that you can stop this from happening? And we have a partnership with Birch International University in Croatia, where we have a team of PhD scientists working on this. And we've been able to combine a unique product called IGY Max, which is a patented egg-based product that enhances your gut health and reverses the damage that can be done by all these toxins that are leading to leaky gut. But when we combined it with some specific probiotics, they work synergistically together to be able to repair leaky gut in literally hours as opposed to going through an extensive protocol. Now, we can't stop ourselves from experiencing all the toxins in our world, or food, air, water, you name it. It's coming from everywhere nowadays. So what we have to look at is well, how do we manage the damage, if you will, that we are taking, even if we're following, the highest levels of food hygiene and, conscientiousness. And so what's happened is Biome Breakthrough has been able to be proven in the lab and in folks. Research papers will be coming out very soon to demonstrate this. And that's why we've called it Biome Breakthrough. We're able to actually repair and stop the leaky gut from happening with the combination of IGY Max. It's a unique set of probiotics, and we're happy to deliver it to people. We're very excited. We can try it. It's a money back guarantee. If you don't feel better, if your poops aren't better, if you don't say, wow, my inflammatory conditions in my gut are going down, you get your money back. So it's really easy to get. You go to biomebreakthrough.com/living4D. You'll put in Paul 10. You get a 10% discount on this and any other products that we supply at Bioptimizers.
I can't recommend it enough. I love the stuff, and it actually tastes good too, which is unique. So thank you very much once again for making such an amazing product. I'm really excited to be able to offer it to everybody. Enjoy Biome Breakthrough. I think it's important for the whole family.
Okay, great. Let's wrap this episode with one more question on relationships. And this comes from David, whose question was regarding a life partner. If you know deep down in your soul that the person you're with is not your soulmate, but you have a really great time with them sharing moments, intimacy, and quality time, is it worth our energy and time to stay with that person?
Well, it's a good question. And having studied relationships quite extensively, because relationship problems are at the root of most people's health problems, unfortunately. In his seminar on relationships, Arnold Patton says that there's 3 stages that are essential to understand if we want healthy long-term relationships. Step 1 is friendship. So first of all, we need to develop a friendship with somebody. And if we're compatible in the friendship, it will naturally grow into a relationship. Now, a lot of people have a hard time differentiating what is a friendship versus a relationship. Well, this is the way I describe it to my students. You have a lot of friends, but how many of them would you trust to pick you up at 4:30 a.m. to get you to a 6 o'clock flight to a job interview or an important meeting and trust that they won't be late, which could screw your opportunity royally? And which of them would you give the keys to your apartment to come water your plants and feed your animals while you're away on a trip like that? And that will differentiate someone you have a relationship with versus a friendship with, because the relationship opens you to the deeper nuances of a person. You begin to know their biases, their habits, their virtues, their vices, their morals, their values. And you develop a deeper level of trust in a relationship than you do in simply a friendship. Like, I have a lot of people I would call my friends, but I don't have that many that I would say I have a relationship with. For example, I would call pretty much almost everyone I've done a podcast interview with my friend, but I could tell you that only a handful have I developed a relationship with, in which I would trust them to take care of my plants and animals and things like that. Now, the third step is intimacy, which for a Western mind and today's culture, the thought of going through the stage of friendship and relationship before having sex puts most people back. But I would also say, think of how much trouble sex before developing a relationship with people has created for most people, and you will see why that is the third step. The other thing is, it's very hard to have any objectivity about the fact that so-and-so isn't your soulmate. I understand the concept, and I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm simply making a statement that you don't really know who your soulmate is until you spent enough time with them to realize that that person will walk through hell with you. Penny is someone that is a soulmate to me. Penny and I have lived through bankruptcy, I lived through bankruptcy. She rescued me from it. But we've lived through times of financial destitute where we were barely making it. We've lived through times where we were making, probably more money than either of us expected to make at times. We've lived through everything that a partnership can endure, and I trust her with my whole existence. If I died, it would be Penny that would be most responsible for deciding what would be done with my life's work, because she has been there with me through a huge amount of the development of it. And my relationship with Penny is far deeper than sex or far deeper than friendship, and it's even deeper than relationship. But I had to go through a lot of relationships and get really clear through those relationships what it was that was ultimately going to sort of identify what a soulmate would be when they showed up. And it was only because of all that I was able to even recognize Penny when she did show up. But sometimes the majority of people think their soulmate is the person that is always great sex and always fun to be with and easy, that doesn't challenge you a lot. But that's just a totally contorted concept. Your soulmate is the one that comes into your life to not only love you, but love you so thoroughly they'll tell you when you're bullshitting yourself and when you're bullshitting others and when you're being inauthentic in relationship, they will be the most polished mirror that you've ever looked at and could be the most challenging person to stay in a relationship with because they will grind the edges off your ego in the most loving and polite way. The person that you're talking about that you described in the beginning, and you said she's not my soulmate, but she could be your soulmate. And you won't know until you go through those 3 stages of friendship, relationship, intimacy. And the thing that I find is that when a relationship's meant to be a long-term relationship, the 2 key things I would point out. 1, it grows like grass. There is a sense that there's an ease. Even when there's challenges, you work through them and there's an ease about it. There's a sense of deep trust that you can trust the person and that you can rely on them. There's a sense of harmony that's deeper than the surface appearances of the relationship or the circumstances of a daily life. The other thing I would say is that when you're meant to be with somebody, when it actually leaves you feeling more empty and incomplete in their absence than when you're with them, yet others who you may have great sex with or a great friendship with, you might actually find that when they're away, you have greater sense of freedom, or that it's kind of like you're getting a break from having guests over. Sometimes there's a need to be alone. I've never had at any point in my 28 years of marriage with Penny, a time where I felt like I wish I could just get away from her for a while. That's the difference. So, when you're with the right person who is ultimately what I would call a soulmate, you will always enjoy their presence more than any time they're absent, and they will always work through the toughest challenges in life with you. And even when you aren't getting along, you'll still know that they love you. And that's a lot different than most people's conception of a soulmate, which is really more like a, teenage honeymoon that never ends kind of thing, which is just a dangerously wrong conception of a soulmate. Did I answer all the aspects of that question?
Maybe just the question of, is it worthwhile continuing to stay with this person?
Is it worthwhile continuing to stay? Well, if they're your friend, I like to stay with my friends. If you're in a relationship with them and it's worthy of a relationship, hey, true love can never be lost. It can only be transformed. So if you stay with that person and your soulmate arrives, you'll know it and you will make the most graceful transition you can out of the level of intimacy in that relationship to the degree that is not harmonious with your so-called soulmate relationship. And I believe that we should never stay with somebody when we realize that we can't fulfill them or be fulfilled by that relationship, because every day we stay with them, we're holding them from the opportunity of finding their soulmate or the person that is more ideal for them. So you just have to decide, is this a friendship? Is this a relationship? Or is this a life partnership? And if you're at the relationship level, but you don't know if it's the life partnership level, then apply the questions I said. How do you feel in that person's absence? How long can you go without them before you feel like a part of you is missing? And can you walk through hell with them and trust them to always be there in ways that give you a sense that you can rely on their feedback, not because they're criticizing you, but because they're actually genuinely trying to support you in being what you can be and being more whole. So simply put, I would say yes. I would apply that to not just your girlfriend or your partner that you're talking about, or boyfriend, whoever it is. I would just say that's a general rule in life.
Okay, great. Thank you, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you enjoyed listening to Paul answering questions sent in by you, our listeners. If you found today's show interesting, Paul continues with questions and answers in the extended version of this podcast available to Spirit Gym podcast members. He answers questions about fertility issues, Kundalini awakening, neck training, dealing with varicose veins, wisdom teeth extraction, vasectomies, the best strategies for recovery, and more. Spirit Gym podcast members get access to all these exclusive extended episodes of Spirit Gym with Paul Chek, members-only Q&A opportunities with Paul, such such as this, access to Podcast Members Forum within the Spirit Gym community where you can interact with other passionate listeners, and the opportunity to purchase exclusive Spirit Gym merchandise. Your support helps keep the show running and allows us to bring you even better content. So if you're ready to dive deeper and unlock all these amazing extras, head over to paulchek.com/podcast and become a Spirit Gym podcast member today. If you are looking for any of the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit the show notes page at paulchek.com/podcast. You can also find details on the special offers from our premier sponsors, Bioptimizers, Wild Pastures, Organifi, and Paleo Valley. Make sure to follow Paul on his social media, Instagram and TikTok at paul.chek, X at paulchek, and his YouTube channel, youtube.com/paulcheklive. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.